This is Friday, April 3rd. No new cases of COVID-19 on PEI, and tonight, more financial help for Islanders.
Property owners will have the option of deferring all property taxes owing until December 31st, 2020.
The Finance Minister outlined new measures to help some Islanders struggling to make ends meet during the pandemic. Good evening. Thank you for joining us on Compass. There are no new cases of COVID-19 on Prince Edward Island tonight. The last briefing of the day ended just over an hour ago. Here are some of today's developments. The number of cases in this province remains at 22. There are now 4 people who have recovered. We learned that one more person was fined for not self-isolating. That man is in Kensington, and more staff members are being added to the 811 line to deal with the influx of calls. 80 additional people are now working to answer those calls. Government also announced more financial help for Islanders today. There is an aid package in the works for students. It will be targeted at students who would be working this summer but now can't. And if you own a home, you do not have to pay your property taxes for now. Those are being deferred. We were given a clear picture today of how the pandemic is affecting the province's bottom line. PEI was planning for a small surplus for the past fiscal year. Now that is a deficit.
3 weeks ago, we were at a $2.5 million surplus. With the significant impact that COVID-19 has had on our province over the past 23 days, we are now forecasting a small deficit of $3.7 million for the 2019-2020 fiscal year.
Those figures are for the last fiscal year, the one that ended March 31st. When asked about the future, Compton said there is little doubt the pandemic will mean adding to the province's debt for the coming year. Well, we have more details as well tonight on testing. We talked about it last night, but now we know more about the local testing done here on PEI. Nicole Williams joins me live again in studio tonight. Hey, Nicole, so we know PEI has begun testing for COVID-19 on the island now. How has that been going?
Well, Louise, we're told that in the last day or so, the province of PEI has done about 30 tests at the PEI laboratory. It's a limited number of tests to start. We knew that, but Dr. Heather Morrison says the hope is to double that capacity every 3 to 7 days. And we're also told today that even if we do identify cases of COVID-19 on PEI, those tests will still have to be sent off to the National Microbiology Lab. Here's Dr. Heather Morrison.
Hopefully we'll get, as we get more capacity here, that will mean that only the positives eventually would may go to the National Microbiology Lab in terms of confirmation quickly, but they would be, but the tests here would be presumptive and then confirmed at the NML.
Of course, public health staff still very busy. We know that more than 1,000 Islanders so far have been tested for COVID-19.
And the province says it's looking at different sites that could be a part of their pandemic response plan.
Yes, so we're told that the province is exploring sites for both patients and healthcare workers dealing with patients of COVID-19. So if and when these hospitals reach capacity, that's the big concern here, is these sites could be a place for those patients to go. And we're also told that these sites could also be a place for healthcare staff to stay during the pandemic. Here's Chief of Nursing Marianne Dowling.
We are looking at a number of other sites for different things as part of our plan. Some of the sites we're reviewing are related to providing some potential staff accommodations for healthcare workers who are not wanting to go back home when we have COVID-19 patients in facilities, and so having a place for them to stay, and then looking at other capacity.
So right now, the province is doing air quality testing at these sites, making sure these buildings are up to certain standards. And we know that one of those buildings is the old Riverview Manor in Montague. We didn't exactly find out where other sites were being tested or what other sites were being looked at. Dowling says they're still trying to firm up those plans and that we'll know more once the situation evolves.
All right, Nicole, thanks so much. That's Nicole Williams reporting live in studio tonight. Another warning from Dr. Morrison telling Islanders to stay vigilant when it comes to staying away from others and following her advice over the coming days, even though there were no new cases announced today.
As we head into another weekend, I'd like to re-emphasize that just because we do not have a new case today, that does not mean we should be complacent. In fact, it is the time that we need to be just as vigilant as ever. I expect the number of cases in PEI to increase, and I expect that we will see cases in Prince Edward Island that will result in hospitalization. And that is why we're working so hard with these public health measures and health PEI to prepare our system.
Last night, we told you that New Brunswick has canceled classes for this school year. Right now, island schools are closed until May 11th. Today, our chief public health officer was asked about that, and Dr. Morrison says she would not be surprised if schools here were closed for longer. She says discussions will be happening in the coming days. Island paramedics say they are putting on protective clothing 5 or 6 times a day now. That's how many calls they get where patients are in self-isolation or showing symptoms of COVID-19. They say their stock of supplies is holding up well. The gear is used once and then it's thrown out. Island EMS says it's fully staffed with 180 paramedics in 14 ambulances. The pandemic is hitting the travel industry hard and having a huge impact at the Charlottetown airport. More flights to and from PEI were canceled today. Wayne Thibodeau has more.
Air Canada has announced that it is cutting its direct flights between Charlottetown and Halifax starting Monday. A spokesperson for Air Canada says the reason for the cancellation in the flights is because of low demand. The airline says it is hopeful that the flights will resume on June 1st. That will mean starting next week, there will only be one Air Canada flight into Charlottetown, a daily direct flight to Montreal. WestJet continues to operate a direct flight to Toronto 3 days a week. Charlottetown Airport was preparing for a banner year. Now the island's only airport is quiet. Passenger travel is down 90%. Officials with the airport authorities say the pandemic will have a significant impact on the airport's bottom line, in the millions of dollars.
You know, a little over a month ago, we were looking at terminal expansions and challenges this summer in terms of how we were going to get people through the airport. And you know, we were looking at a banner year for the Charlottetown Airport Authority and the tourism industry. And just it feels like overnight that that has done a complete 180. So it's certainly stressful times, but we're not alone in this, obviously.
The airport is hoping for federal government help. It has announced it will waive airport rent, but that is based on revenue. Newson says it might mean about $5,000 for the Charlottetown Airport. In the meantime, the airport is deferring capital projects and trying to cut costs. Newson says it's hard to predict the future, especially now, but some smaller airports have already seen all of their flights canceled. Newson says if this pandemic goes on for too long, the same thing may very well happen here. Wayne Thibodeau, CBC News, Charlottetown.
Thousands of islanders who work in restaurants have lost their jobs in the last month. Restaurants Canada put out some numbers today, and it says almost 3,800 people are out of work on Prince Edward Island. And there are worries many of the jobs might not come back because some restaurants could close permanently. Cavendish Farms is telling its island farmers to sell their potatoes somewhere else if they can. With restaurants closed, the processing plant has too much product to meet the dwindling demand for French fries. The company says it's curtailed production at its plant in New Annan. There's no word on whether any of this will lead to layoffs. Cavendish Farms is the biggest private employer on PEI, 700 workers at peak production. There is a lot of concern tonight from many seasonal workers on the island. They're worried about just how much government help they can count on if their jobs don't go ahead. Many were hoping they'd qualify for the federal emergency response benefit, but learned this week they may not. Steve Bruce has more.
Well, those who qualify for this federal emergency benefit can count on $500 a week for up to 16 weeks. But the bad news for most seasonal workers, it seems they don't qualify. In the program criteria posted online this week, it says to get the money, you need to have been in a job that you've had to stop working because of the pandemic. Most seasonal workers on the island have not been working. They've been off all winter, waiting on jobs to start up soon, jobs that now may be in jeopardy. Malpeque MP Wayne Easter says he's been hearing from lots of islanders in that situation, worried they'll be getting no help from Ottawa.
Already have been on employment insurance and are operating with practically no income at the moment. So we have to address that concern.
Easter says until a few days ago, he thought seasonal workers would be able to access the emergency benefit. Egan Boire thought the same thing. He's an engineering student about to finish his semester. He was all lined up to start work at Veterans Affairs in a few weeks, but now that job is up in the air, and he's worried about his finances.
A little bit of panic, obviously. Hopefully they see that there's a big blind spot in this program.
Easter actually chairs Parliament's Finance Committee and says he's still hoping to get seasonal workers included in the program. In fact, he's advising them to go online and apply in hopes that things are all worked out soon. Now, if that doesn't turn out to be the case, those workers may still be able to get some money from the PEI government, albeit a much smaller amount. The province just announced yesterday that it will provide up to $1,000 for islanders who have been affected by the pandemic but don't qualify for other programs. Steve Bruce, CBC News, Meadowbank.
There's a lot more waste at the curb since the pandemic began, and it's affecting the amount of time it takes drivers to complete their routes. Island Waste Management says it seems people are doing a lot of spring cleaning or renovations. You're allowed to have 2 bags in addition to your bin, but anything above that will not be picked up. There will still be a spring cleanup this year. The price of gas has dropped yet again, down 1.5 cents. A litre of regular unleaded is now between 72 and 73 cents a litre. Demand is obviously way down with the COVID-19 pandemic. Heating oil and diesel were down as well, and there was no change in the price of propane.
Well, it was nice to see a little bit of sunshine starting late this afternoon, and we'll have a bit more sun in the forecast. Not uninterrupted sunshine, but at least some sunshine in the forecast for the weekend. I'll be back with the details on how your Saturday and your Sunday will play out. And also, we'll take a look ahead to what you can expect next week with your full 7-day forecast. That's coming up on Compass.
Many small businesses are wondering how they, or even if they, will survive the COVID-19 pandemic. My guest tonight is Louis-Philippe Gauthier from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, and he joins us via Skype from Moncton. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Let's start with what you are hearing right now from small business operators.
Extremely difficult times, devastating, really. The reality that they're living is one where their livelihoods are essentially either being shut down or put on hold, on pause. Just from the data and the conversations, you can hear it in the voices, you can hear it in when they're talking to you. A lot of concerns relating to cost, to fixed cost, worrying about their employees, and worrying about the future and the immediate future, that is. So how are we going to be paying rent? How are we going to be paying back our bank loans, and et cetera? And of course, there's different government measures that have been put in place, but how do they fit to them? And what's the reality for my business is the daily thing right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed so much since you and I last spoke, and that was on March 17th. And as you mentioned, there have been a number of initiatives announced since then to help small businesses and others. So let's start with the federal aid and those wage subsidies. Who will that help?
Well, it'll help businesses that want to maintain their employees that are still operating, or that might want to bring their employees back onto their payroll. We're supportive of the initiative. We were initially not very happy because it was a 10% wage subsidy. We pushed hard and we brought it to 75. Now, there's one criteria in there that for a lot of businesses disqualifies them, the 30% reduction in sales. And right now we're asking the federal government to remove that, to allow as many businesses as possible to take advantage of that wage subsidy. The objective there is really to keep people off EI and to maintain a relationship with the business owner.
What about the provincial measures that are in place here on PEI?
The Prince Edward Island government has done a good job of releasing many programs that are there to design to help in the gaps between the federal aid that's coming. Multiple programs announced. Actually have to give them kudos on that and the speed at which they put them in place. The communications with the Prince Edward Island government are very fluid. Everybody's accessible, regular meetings. They're listening to the business community. They signal their intent to adjust and to fill as many gaps as possible. So from that perspective, quick reaction and good measures as much as can be afforded. Right now, one of the considerations that we brought forward today, actually this morning in the meeting, was that as government looks to creating either new programs or adjusting the ones that are there, moving away from deferrals all the way to complete waiving or grants is something that they need to start thinking about. Shoveling costs forward in deferrals makes it so it just adds on to the burden when this will stop, and it makes it extremely difficult in certain situations. So that's a consideration that we're asking the provincial governments and the federal government to start looking at as they adjust or roll out new programs.
When this is all over, and that's, of course, the big question mark, when will it all be over? Do you expect to see a vastly different small business landscape, not just on PEI, but across the country?
Will the landscape change? Yes. Will there be less businesses that used to be there over the first year or 2 years when everything starts back? I think the answer is yes. From a tourism perspective, that's a big question. A lot of our members that are in that sector are wondering how quickly it will resume, when it can resume. And there's a whole series of sectors that they're faced with that reality. It's not easy. The conversations that we're having, our call center that's fielding calls from our members and other business owners across the country have been operating at 10 times the level of calls since this has started. And in a normal day, when we say that a business owner's life is intrinsically linked to their business and they put their hearts and their lives into them, sometimes it's something that people kind of dismiss, but it's at times like these that you realize that's the reality.
I can hear the emotion in your voice when you speak about that, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
My pleasure.
As we go to break, a live look outside our studio in Charlottetown on this Friday night. Jay's full forecast is coming up after this break. Stay with us.
I'm Mitch Cormier. The Queen Elizabeth Hospital Foundation raises money before it buys any medical equipment. COVID-19 has turned that model upside down. We'll find out about the group's efforts on the next Island Morning.
Well, it's time to head out to Jay's home weather bureau for a look at how the weekend is shaping up. So, Jay, we saw a little bit of sun today, popped out for a little bit. Will there be more of that this weekend?
Yes, there will be. Not as much of a game of peekaboo as we saw today with that sunshine, although it was nice to see at least a little bit of sunshine today. When you say my home weather bureau, the camera that you're looking at me on at home, folks, is actually sitting in my dining room while I'm out on the back deck. And the reason that is, it's so windy, I don't want the camera to blow over. And it was pretty gusty today. We did see some gusts beyond 70 kilometers per hour, notably in Summerside last night, North Cape. And it was around 65K peak gust recorded at Charlottetown Airport, by the way. Temperatures were up as warm as 4 degrees on the island today in Charlottetown, still sitting between 0 and +2. So it was around seasonal to just below seasonal today. Here's the reason why we didn't get up to above that seasonal average. It was that strong northeast wind roaring in off the Gulf. We're still seeing those sustained winds, 30 to near 50 kilometers per hour. We still are seeing gusts near 60 kilometers per hour as well. There is a look at our satellite and radar picture. Pretty quiet. We are looking at some low cloud. I was seeing a little bit of blue sky peeking out earlier, not much at the moment, and we will continue to see a mostly cloudy sky this evening. Likely going to see a mostly cloudy sky overnight as well. I didn't put a big blue H on the weather map. That odd tracking storm system continues to move to our south, and we're kind of in between weather makers. So it's a relative area of high pressure that will keep us mostly cloudy but calm tomorrow morning, a little breezy, but breaks of sunshine, a bit more than what we saw today for your Saturday afternoon. And then as we head into your Sunday, we're going to see that sky clear up a little bit more into Sunday through the middle part of the day. Late afternoon, evening, we'll watch for clouds to start to build as our next frontal system approaches. That'll bring a little bit of wet snow and some rain into Monday. Overnight hours tonight, temperatures will be down into the -1 to -2 degree range under a mostly cloudy sky over western PEI. Not warming up above the freezing mark by more than maybe a degree in a few areas you're not seeing on the weather map here. More cloud than sun, but we'll see a fair amount of sunny breaks at least through the afternoon. Temperatures between 0 and -1 over eastern PEI tonight. As we get into tomorrow, temperatures will top out between +1 and +2. We'll still feel below the freezing mark, though, because those winds out of the northeast, not as windy as today, but still 20 to gusting over 30 kilometers per hour. We will see a bit of a wind chill. Still below seasonal, but a fair amount of sunshine for much of Sunday. We get a little messy, but not too much precipitation on Monday. And there's a look at the next 7 as we head into the weekend. Louise, TGIF.
TGIF to you, too. Have a wonderful weekend. Well, many of us are getting a bit stir-crazy these days and finding unique ways to kill the time. As we take a break, have a look at what one of our CBC colleagues in Halifax came up with when he had a little bit too much time on his hands. Well, there was another touching display of thanks on PEI today. This one up west, a parade of emergency vehicles to show support to healthcare workers and first responders. Everyone gathered at the Alberton Fire Hall. The vehicles then plan to go by Western Hospital and the Manor, then continue to the Senior Center in Tignish, and then on to O'Leary. Emergency vehicles in Charlottetown held a similar tribute earlier this week. So great to see all the support for first responders and those frontline workers. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for Compass. You can always log on to cbc.ca/PEI for more news from our province 24 hours a day. Vashi Capellos is up next with Power and Politics. We hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. Good night, PEI.